Hello, everyone. Welcome, everyone, to the channel Strange Night Podcast. Story 1. The Obsession from the Backyard. Tonight we began our terrifying journey in Canada, where a case exposed the dark side of worshiping the perfect image. The case of the couple Douglas and Melanie S. and their young daughter, Clara. Douglas, a tech executive, and Melanie, a yoga instructor, lived in an affluent neighborhood in suburban Toronto. They had an enviable life, a picturesque house, 2 luxury cars, and their first daughter, Lily, who was adorable and talented. They were the archetype of success and happiness admired by society. However, when Clara, their second child, was born, everything changed. Clara suffered from severe Down syndrome and multiple other serious health issues, requiring specialized and expensive care. For Douglas and Melanie, Clara was not just a financial and physical burden. She was a defect that ruined the perfect family portrait they had meticulously constructed. They were obsessed with maintaining their image of flawless success on social media and within the community. Clara's birth meant losing control over their life and reputation. They began to isolate Clara. While Lily was showcased and enrolled in talent classes, Clara was virtually hidden, never brought to family gatherings or social parties. Their anger was directed not at fate, but at the sheer inconvenience Clara represented. Gradually, their compassion was replaced by cold calculation. They realized that the cost of Clara's care was threatening their affluent lifestyle. The couple began discussing a radical solution to regain control of their lives. Their plan centered on the luxurious swimming pool in their backyard. That summer, they prepared for a perfect accident. On a hot Sunday afternoon, after ensuring Lily was at a friend's house, Douglas brought Clara out to the pool. The little girl, due to her condition, was unable to defend herself or swim. Melanie called the police in a feigned panic, reporting that they had only taken their eyes off Clara for a few minutes and she had fallen into the pool. Douglas performed a flawless, distressed act of attempting CPR. The case was initially ruled a tragic accident. The couple received deep sympathy from the community and even established a charity fund in their daughter's memory, further solidifying their image as grieving victims. However, Detective Sergeant Kim, the lead investigator, felt something was wrong. The physical evidence didn't entirely align. Clara, given her medical condition, could barely move on her own, let alone get out of her specialized wheelchair and into the pool. Detective Kim focused on Douglas and Melanie's phone and computer records. She uncovered months of back-and-forth messages and emails where they coldly discussed financial issues and used chilling euphemisms about the need to eliminate the burden and reset their lives. One email was particularly damning, with Melanie writing, "We need to get our image back. People are staring." When confronted with this evidence, especially the inconsistency in their statements and the stark indifference in their private communications, Douglas broke down. He confessed that they had deliberately pushed Clara into the pool, believing that this death was necessary to protect their wealth and social standing. The case of the obsession from the backyard shook Canada. It exposed a brutal truth. In a society obsessed with perfection and materialism, parental love can sometimes be warped into cold calculation, willing to sacrifice one's own flesh and blood to maintain a fabricated image. Story 2. The Forged Suicide Note. Tonight we fly to London, United Kingdom, where medical expertise was twisted into a tool for crime, and marriage vows were replaced by a forged suicide note. This is the chilling case of Dr. Julian H. and his wealthy wife, Eleanor. Dr. Julian H. was one of the leading heart surgeons at a prestigious private hospital in London. He possessed sharp intellect, high social status, and an affluent life, thanks to the massive inherited fortune of his wife, Eleanor. However, Julian had grown weary of Eleanor and desperately wanted out of their long, cold marriage. He was infatuated with a young nurse with whom he wished to start a new life. The only thing preventing Julian was the fact that he would lose control of a significant portion of Eleanor's assets if they divorced. Julian planned his wife's murder meticulously, using his specialized medical knowledge to conceal the crime. He knew he couldn't use common poisons. He turned to digoxin, a powerful cardiac drug that is notoriously difficult to detect in the body if administered in small, repeated doses. Julian's plan was to slowly poison Eleanor, making her death appear to be a heart complication or a suicide resulting from depression. For weeks, Julian mixed digoxin into Eleanor's evening tea and vitamins. He used precise doses to induce vague heart failure symptoms, causing Eleanor to grow increasingly weak and emotionally fragile. He played the role of the devoted husband, taking her to the hospital for checkups, even reassuring his fellow doctors that it was merely stress plaguing a middle-aged woman. Before finally delivering the lethal dose, Julian prepared his ultimate card, a suicide note. He had spent months practicing, meticulously copying his wife's handwriting. The contents of the letter were an apology for her mental fragility and an expression of her intent to end her life. On the fateful night, Julian injected Eleanor with a massive dose of digoxin. The next morning, he found her body and called the police, with the forged suicide note neatly placed on her bedside table. The police and the medical examiner initially accepted the suicide conclusion. However, Detective Inspector Davies, the case officer, sensed an anomaly. Davies knew that Eleanor, despite her apparent frailty, was mentally strong and had no history of psychological illness. What tipped Davies off the most was the suicide note itself. Although the handwriting was a near-perfect match, Davies noted an unusual stiffness in the script compared to Eleanor's other notes. He sent the letter for in-depth graphological analysis. While awaiting the results, Davies investigated Julian's finances and personal life. He quickly uncovered the doctor's massive gambling debts and his secret affair with the young nurse. When the final toxicology report was released, it flipped the case. Researchers found traces of digoxin. However, the forged suicide note proved to be the smoking gun. Graphological analysis revealed that the letter had been written by a left-handed person, even though Eleanor was right-handed. Julian was left-handed. When confronted, Julian H., the arrogant and self-assured man, collapsed. He confessed to using his medical knowledge to commit the crime and his sophistication to cover it up. He killed his wife not out of hate, but out of greed for money and the cold desire to start a new life without bearing any consequences. The case of the forged suicide note is a terrifying reminder of the danger when a crime is committed by an intelligent individual with professional expertise. Story 3. The Ice Cream Queen. Tonight we stop in Florida, USA, where a wife's sweet smile concealed a crime colder than ice cream. This is the case of Deborah J., the Ice Cream Queen, and the mysterious death of her wealthy husband, Harold. Deborah J. was the epitome of the American dream, a young, beautiful woman who ran a quaint ice cream parlor famous for its vintage decor and delicious artisanal desserts. Deborah was known for her charm and radiant smile, making her beloved in the community. She married Harold, a wealthy real estate developer 2 decades her senior. Their marriage appeared to be a perfect blend of financial stability and youthful vitality. However, behind the closed doors of their luxurious beachfront home, cracks began to show. Deborah did not love Harold. She married him for his money and the extravagant lifestyle. She quickly grew tired of her aging husband and began a secret affair with a young ingredient supplier for her ice cream shop. Ola, a sharp businessman, grew suspicious. After hiring a private investigator and confirming Deborah's infidelity, Harold decided to take a firm stand. He began revising his will, cutting Deborah out of the majority of his estate and threatening divorce, which would force her out of the home and the beloved ice cream parlor. For Deborah, the loss of wealth was unacceptable. She could not return to her former life of poverty. She decided that Harold had to disappear before he could finalize the legal proceedings. Deborah used her profession to craft a perfect plan. She decided to use arsenic, an odorless, tasteless poison known for its ability to mimic symptoms of severe food poisoning or heart failure. She knew Harold was addicted to her homemade vanilla ice cream. Over several weeks, she secretly mixed small doses of arsenic into her husband's favorite treat. Harold began experiencing fatigue, nausea, and severe stomach pain. Everyone, including doctors, attributed it to old age or poor eating habits. On a weekend evening, Deborah prepared the final dose for Harold. She served him an especially large, sweet, and deadly bowl of vanilla ice cream. Harold died at the hospital a few days later, with the initial diagnosis being massive heart failure. Deborah wept at the hospital, her image as the grieving widow broadcast on local news, and she quickly took control of Harold's entire estate, including hefty life insurance policies. The case seemed closed until Detective Ramon G. received an anonymous call from Harold's brother. The brother was suspicious, pointing out that Harold was health conscious and his sudden death just before finalizing divorce proceedings was too coincidental. Detective Ramon began investigating Deborah. He focused on the ice cream shop's supply chain. Although she tried to erase all traces, Ramon found a suspicious transaction: a small order for laboratory-grade chemicals under the ice cream shop's name, one of which could be used to compound arsenic. Crucially, Detective Ramon persuaded the medical examiner's office to conduct a second autopsy. Analysis of the hair and tissue confirmed the presence of arsenic at lethal concentrations. When confronted, Deborah maintained her calm and sweet facade. However, when Ramon presented evidence of her affair and the chemical purchase, the ice cream queen's face crumbled. She confessed to using the ice cream to conceal the poison. She killed her husband not out of hatred, but because she refused to give up the luxurious lifestyle he had bought her. The case of Deborah J. is a terrifying example of how crime can hide behind the most charming and sweet exterior. Story 4. The Bloody Inheritance. Race. Tonight we head to Munich, Germany, where brotherhood was crushed under the wheels of a multi-million-dollar tech company. This is the tragic story of power rivalry and greed between two brothers, Klaus and Lucas Richter. The Richter family owned Richter Tech, a software technology empire founded by their late father. When the father passed away, the company was split equally between his two sons, Klaus, 35, and Lucas, 32. Klaus, the older brother, was a conservative, hard-working man who believed he was the more deserving heir. He resented Lucas because his younger brother Lucas was a playboy, prone to partying and frequently squandered company money on unnecessary personal projects. Klaus's jealousy stemmed not only from finances, but from respect. While Lucas was reckless, his bold ideas sometimes landed major contracts, making Klaus feel challenged in his executive role. The conflict reached its climax when Lucas decided to mortgage a significant portion of the company's assets to invest in a dubious startup. Klaus desperately tried to stop him, knowing that if the project failed, Richter Tech would be severely damaged. But Lucas just scoffed, calling Klaus a coward. Klaus realized that to save his father's legacy and assert absolute leadership, he had to eliminate his brother. He decided to stage Lucas's death as a horrific industrial accident, which was plausible in the company's vast warehouse. Late one Wednesday night, while Lucas stayed behind to finalize some paperwork, Klaus executed his plan. He lured Lucas into the heavy goods storage area under the pretense of checking a new security system. There, Klaus attacked Lucas from behind with a blunt object. After Lucas was unconscious, Klaus used a forklift to overturn a rack full of heavy servers and components, crushing Lucas underneath. He quickly wiped away the blood, ensuring Lucas only appeared to be flattened by the accident. Klaus called the police, putting on a show of shock and distress at finding his brother. He explained that Lucas must have been operating the forklift late at night to move some equipment and had an accident. Initially, German police and industrial safety inspectors accepted the accident conclusion. However, Commissar Schneider, a seasoned detective, noticed an inconsistency. The forklift was found in a locked state and could only be started with a special key kept in the surveillance office, where Lucas had no authorization to enter. Schneider focused on Klaus. He was the only one with the surveillance office key and the one with the biggest motive to eliminate his brother, especially following Lucas's recent risky investment decision. Upon closer examination, the detective found a small, barely visible blood smear on the forklift's handle, next to Klaus's fingerprints, inconsistent with Klaus merely discovering the body. The financial pressure and the fingerprint evidence caused Klaus Richter to collapse during interrogation. He confessed that jealousy had killed him before he even killed his brother. He couldn't bear the thought that Lucas would destroy the family company and seize the power that he believed rightfully belonged only to him. The case of the bloody inheritance race is a chilling story of the fact that, in the capitalist world, family can fracture over money and power, and the envy between siblings can become more dangerous than any business rival. Story 5. The Fight for Approval. Tonight we stop in glamorous Paris, where romance was overshadowed by burning jealousy and a desperate need for recognition. This is the tragic story of two sisters, Céline and Eloise Dubois, and Eloise's fight for approval. Céline and Eloise were the daughters of a wealthy, powerful family in the French haute couture industry. However, affection within the family was distributed unjustly. Céline, the older sister, was her parents' pride. She was not only beautiful, but also academically brilliant, a graduate of a prestigious university, and destined to inherit the family empire. Céline always received praise, attention, and absolute love from her parents. In stark contrast, Eloise, the younger sister, lived in a faint shadow. She was considered the failure, less attractive, and lacking ambition. No matter what Eloise did, she was met with indifference or hurtful comparisons from her parents. Her desperate craving for love and recognition curdled into a malignant tumor of resentment toward Céline. Everything escalated when Céline became engaged to Olivier, a rich, charming young financier. Eloise was also secretly in love with Olivier, but he only saw her as his fiancée's little sister. The fact that Céline had everything, love, career, and parental approval, was too much for Eloise to bear. Eloise began to believe that if Céline disappeared, she would naturally step into her place. She believed Olivier would finally see her worth and her parents would be forced to focus their love and expectations on her. The plan was executed on the night of Celine's lavish bachelorette party at a penthouse overlooking the Seine. After everyone had left, only the two sisters remained, cleaning up. Eloise used an empty champagne bottle to attack Celine from behind. She did not want Celine to suffer, but wanted the act to be quick, ending her sister's long reign of dominance. After killing Celine, Eloise staged the scene as a failed burglary, taking a few expensive pieces of jewelry, but deliberately leaving behind Celine's massive diamond engagement ring. The next morning, Eloise called the police, putting on a perfect show of distress, sobbing about her sister's murder. However, Capitaine Moreau, the investigating detective, noticed several inconsistencies. What made him most suspicious was Celine's wound. It was too forceful and precise, unlike the actions of a panicked thief. Furthermore, why would a thief leave behind a multi-million-dollar engagement ring? Moreau began to scrutinize the family dynamics. He detected hidden tensions and palpable jealousy in family photos and in the statements of friends. Moreau focused on Eloise. Throughout the investigation, Eloise expressed excessive concern over who would inherit the wedding dress and who would comfort Olivier. The decisive blow came when Moreau discovered Eloise's digital journal. In it, she not only expressed deep hatred for Celine, but also meticulously outlined her plan. When Celine's light goes out, I will finally shine. I deserve Olivier in that position. When confronted, Eloise collapsed. She confessed, not out of remorse for her sister's death, but out of bitter realization that even with Celine gone, she failed to win the love and approval she craved. A horrified Olivier immediately severed all ties with the Dubois family. The case of the fight for approval is a tragedy of how much jealousy can destroy a person. Eloise killed her sister for an illusion that death would bring her the love and respect she couldn't earn on her own. Story 6. The Grudge, from the Trust Fund. Tonight we return to California, USA, where a mother-daughter relationship was poisoned by insatiable greed and financial control. This is the tragic story of Candace R. and the death of her wealthy mother, Vivian. Vivian R. was the widow of a real estate tycoon, possessing a massive fortune held within a complex trust fund. She lived in a luxurious Malibu mansion and maintained full control over the inheritance her only daughter, Candace, would receive upon her death. Candace R. was in her 30s, but still completely dependent on her mother's generous monthly allowance. Candace was a spoiled woman with a compulsive shopping addiction and an unrestrained, extravagant lifestyle. She was obsessed with inheriting the trust fund, the money that would make her financially independent forever and allow her to stop asking her mother for permission for every expenditure. Vivian, the intelligent and shrewd mother, knew her daughter was a terrible financial manager. She tried to help Candace by maintaining control, but this only fueled Candace's hatred. Candace felt her mother was not a protector, but a cruel money keeper, stifling her free life. The conflict escalated when Candace secretly mortgaged her assets to invest in a failed business venture and desperately needed a massive amount of cash to pay off debts. She pleaded with her mother to release the trust fund early, but Vivian flatly refused. Vivian made a fateful decision. She would amend the trust terms, allowing Candace only to receive annual interest under strict supervision, aiming to protect the principal from her daughter's wasteful spending. This meant Candace would never access the bulk of the money. For Candace, this was a death sentence for her luxurious future. She decided that if she couldn't convince her mother, she would have to eliminate her before the legal procedures were finalized. Candace planned the murder during a getaway the two were taking at a secluded seaside resort. She knew the resort was quiet and had little foot traffic. One night, Candace helped her mother take her usual sleeping pills. Once Vivian was in a deep sleep, Candace carried out her act. She strangled her mother with a silk scarf, ensuring no obvious external wounds were left. She then staged her mother's death as a drowning or a fall accident in the bathroom after an accidental sleeping pill overdose. Candace reported that her mother had slipped in the bathroom and died from a head injury. The case was initially closed as a bathroom accident, especially since Candace sobbed hysterically and immediately took control of her mother's mansion and accounts. However, Vivian's lawyer, who was aware of the tensions between the mother and daughter and Vivian's impending will change, alerted local police. Detective Gomez began the investigation. He noted Candace's unusual haste in liquidating assets and her cold demeanor when discussing funeral arrangements. Gomez focused on the accident nature of the bathroom death. Forensic analysis showed no water in Vivian's lungs, ruling out drowning. More importantly, the detective discovered small, subtle bruises on Vivian's neck. These were not typical signs of a fall. Gomez found a critical, secret witness, a housekeeping staff member who saw Candace entering her mother's room long after she had gone to sleep, and subsequently heard a faint noise. Under the pressure of conflicting evidence and her threatened financial records, Candace finally confessed. She admitted to killing her mother to prevent the trust fund change. Her confession was chillingly detached. She stated, "She was withholding my money. I just took back what was mine." The case of the grudge from the trust fund is a tragic story of how financial greed and the desperate desire for freedom from control can turn blood ties into deadly resentment. Story 7. The Phantom of Wall Street. Tonight, we delve into the heart of financial power, New York City, where a son paid the ultimate price to escape his father's absolute dominance. This is the story of Arthur S., the son of Wall Street titan Richard S. Richard S. was a legend on Wall Street, known for his brutality and ruthlessness in deals and his limitless ability to make money. However, his power and authoritarianism did not stop at the office. They permeated every corner of his family life. His only son, Arthur S., was the main victim. Arthur endured lifelong control and psychological abuse from his father. Richard S. never physically hit his son, but he used words sharp as knives, constantly humiliating Arthur in front of others, calling him weak and unworthy of the inheritance. Arthur was sent to prestigious private schools and worked within his father's financial empire. Yet every success was dismissed by Richard S. In Richard's eyes, Arthur was merely a tool to maintain the family name. Arthur lived in a gilded cage filled with anxiety and resentment. Arthur knew he would never achieve freedom or respect as long as his father was alive. After years of seeking professional help to no avail, the idea of killing his father gradually became Arthur's only perceived way out. Not for the money, but for mental liberation. Arthur planned his father's murder in Richard's opulent Manhattan penthouse. He knew his father's schedule, security routines, and the apartment layout like the back of his hand. On a late Sunday night, when Richard S. returned home after a charity gala, Arthur was waiting. He had disabled the internal security system and waited for the moment Richard S. was alone in his private study. Arthur avoided using a gun or knife to prevent immediate suspicion. He used a heavy but common object to attack his father from behind, inflicting a fatal head wound. He then carefully staged the scene, taking some cash and an expensive watch. and intentionally leaving a window slightly ajar to suggest a botched break-in and robbery. The case immediately drew national attention. Media focused on whether a financial titan could be killed by a random thief. Detective Leo F. was assigned the case. Leo quickly doubted the botched robbery scenario. The thief took cash, but ignored much more valuable artwork. Furthermore, the slightly open window was too obvious, almost a clumsy setup. Leo focused on Arthur. The son appeared distressed, but his emotional control was too perfect. During interrogations, Arthur spoke about his father objectively, without warmth, but also without overt hatred. Detective Leo F. found the crucial key in Arthur's medical history. Years of therapy for symptoms of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, stemming from chronic psychological abuse in childhood. Leo summoned Arthur back. Instead of asking about the robbery, Leo asked about the gilded cage Richard had created. Leo stated, "You didn't kill your father for money, Arthur. You killed him for the freedom he stole from you. You eliminated the Phantom of Wall Street, the one who haunted you your entire life." Confronted with the psychological truth, Arthur S. finally confessed. He explained that the act was not revenge, but a final act of self-rescue from his father's psychological destruction. He simply wanted to silence Richard's imposing voice and power within his own mind. The case of the Phantom of Wall Street is a tragedy of how wealth and power can corrupt family bonds, and how psychological abuse can have consequences as deadly as physical abuse. Story 8. The Secret in the Wine Cellar. Tonight we journey to the sun-drenched region of Tuscany, Italy, where rolling hills and picturesque vineyards became the final resting place for a lifelong friendship. This is the tragic story of 4 close friends, Marco, Stefano, Paolo, and Alessio, and their disastrous business venture. These 4 friends grew up together in Florence and jointly established Vigneto Quattro, a small but ambitious vineyard and wine cellar. They invested all their savings, dreaming of turning it into a luxury wine brand, a symbol of their friendship and success. However, as the vineyard began to yield significant profits, greed started to creep in. Marco, who was in charge of finance and export management, became secretive and controlling. Stefano, Marco's closest friend and the one responsible for viticulture, was the first to grow suspicious. He noticed that the actual profits from large export shipments did not match the figures Marco reported to the other partners. Stefano secretly investigated and uncovered the horrifying truth. Marco had embezzled a massive amount of money, transferring it to offshore accounts and falsifying accounting records, skimming the shares of the other 3. Stefano confronted Paolo and Alessio. All 3 felt profoundly betrayed. The vineyard was not just a business. It was their shared dream, and Marco had destroyed it for his greed. They decided to hold a secret meeting in the wine cellar on a rainy night to confront Marco. The meeting took place in the dark cellar, where expensive wine bottles lay silently in the shadows. It started with words, then escalated into bitter accusations. Marco, desperate and cornered, challenged them, scoffing at their naivety and threatening to expose them for disclosing business secrets. Desperation and rage pushed them over the edge. Paolo was the first to act, shoving Marco hard into a wine rack. Alessio and Stefano joined the scuffle. In the chaos, Marco was struck and crushed by heavy objects from the rack, killing him instantly. The remaining 3 friends stood looking at Marco's body, realizing they had crossed a point of no return. They had to conceal the crime to protect not only their freedom, but also their vineyard dream. They decided the perfect disposal method was to bury Marco right in the vineyard. They had recently tilled a large area for planting a new batch of vines. They worked under the stormy night, interring their friend beneath the damp, rich clay soil, ensuring Marco would become a part of the land he had betrayed. The next morning, the three reported Marco missing, claiming he had absconded with company money and a new girlfriend after his fraud was discovered. The disappearance and fraud allegations were investigated by the Carabinieri police. Detective Capo Rossi suspected the haste of the remaining three to publicly declare Marco a traitor. Rossi noticed that the three were too consistent in their statements, with no emotional inconsistencies, which was unusual for people who had just been betrayed. Rossi investigated the vineyard area, paying close attention to a newly tilled plot near the cellar. He noted that the soil there was too soft and worked over compared to other areas, an anomaly for that time of year. Detective Rossi secretly excavated a small portion of that area. Beneath the soil, Rossi found a blood-stained piece of cloth and a missing ring belonging to Marco. Under the weight of the discovered evidence, Stefano, who had the weakest conscience, broke down. He confessed everything, explaining they didn't intend to kill Marco, only to confront him about the betrayal. The case of the secret in the wine cellar is a bitter tragedy about how financial greed can turn a devoted friendship into a band of criminals. Story 9. The Refugee Hunt. Tonight we journey to Sweden, a nation renowned for its welfare and humanitarianism, yet one that provided a perfect hiding spot for a most ruthless predator. This is the story of Linus B., a psychopath, and his victims within the refugee community in Stockholm. Linus B. was a middle-aged man with a gentle demeanor, working in the IT sector. He had no overt history of violence. What was chilling was his active participation in volunteer work, specifically assisting newly arrived refugees who struggled to integrate and build new lives. In an advanced society like Sweden, the refugee community is often the most vulnerable. They are unfamiliar with the language, unaware of the legal system, and frequently lack complete official documentation. Linus exploited this very isolation and their desperate need for assistance. He crafted a perfect image of benevolence. Linus helped victims find jobs, taught them basic Swedish, and provided temporary lodging. In doing so, he gained their absolute trust, their gratitude, and, most importantly, complete control over their lives. Linus's motive was not financial gain, but the absolute power over human life. He sought perverse gratification in controlling, tormenting, and ultimately killing those without a voice, whose disappearance would likely draw the least attention. The case began to be investigated when a social worker noticed the unusual disappearance of 3 refugees within a year, all of whom were connected to Linus. When questioned, Linus explained that they had moved to other cities or secretly returned to their home countries. Commissary Sophia H., the investigating detective, grew suspicious. She knew that a refugee going missing was not uncommon, but 3 within a short period, all vanishing after interacting with the same volunteer helper, was too much of a coincidence. Sophia focused on Linus B.'s records and found an anomaly. Linus frequently rented a small warehouse in the suburbs, which he rarely used for his IT work. Sophia obtained a warrant to search the warehouse. Inside, they found no bodies, but they found horrific evidence of torture and confinement. They recovered personal items belonging to the 3 missing individuals and, crucially, a detailed journal kept by Linus. The journal was not a confession, but a cold description of his hunting process. Linus wrote about the feeling of power he derived from witnessing the victim's despair and trust. He wrote, "They are the perfect gifts. No one looks for them. I am their God." When police arrested Linus, he maintained his calm, polite demeanor and denied all allegations. However, when confronted with the journal, his composure finally broke. Linus confessed to luring the victims to the warehouse, confining and torturing them for days before killing them. He used the snow and the isolation of the rural area to dispose of the bodies. He showed no remorse. Instead, he expressed pride in his perfect plan. The case of the refugee hunt is a chilling warning. The most vulnerable members of society are the perfect prey for psychopaths. Linus B's false benevolence was his deadliest weapon, exploiting trust to commit his crimes. Story 10. The Malignant Heart. Tonight we conclude our journey in Australia, where the bright lights of social media concealed one of the most horrifying crimes against one's own flesh and blood. This is the tragic story of the Evans family and their young son Archie, a victim of a new kind of greed, the hunger for online fame. Mark and Jessica Evans were a young couple in Sydney. They were not wealthy, but they had a priceless asset on social media, a perfect family YouTube and Instagram channel with hundreds of thousands of followers. They built their brand around their dream life and their adorable son, Archie. However, when Archie turned 2, the channel started to stagnate. Viewership dropped, and advertising contracts dried up. Mark and Jessica, accustomed to the large income from social media, grew desperate to maintain attention. They conceived a malignant idea. They began posting videos and articles suggesting that Archie was suffering from a mysterious, rare illness that caused him constant suffering. Initially, it was just small lies about doctor visits, but soon they began staging scenes. When the audience expressed sympathy and concern, their viewership soared. Their YouTube channel filled with videos of the fragile Archie, and they began receiving tens of thousands of dollars in donations from their compassionate followers. This greed pushed them over the edge. Mark and Jessica realized that to sustain their popularity and the stream of donations, Archie had to genuinely look sick and pitiful. They began deliberately neglecting and abusing their son. They restricted Archie's food intake, denied him proper sleep, and secretly withheld necessary supplements, causing the boy's health to rapidly decline. They filmed the moments Archie cried from hunger and exhaustion, sharing the videos with the caption, "Warrior Archie fighting the good fight." The final tragedy occurred when Archie, due to severe malnutrition and exhaustion, died at home. Mark and Jessica immediately filmed a tearful video announcing the tragedy and urging the community to donate money to a memorial fund to cover the expensive funeral costs. The incident was widely considered a heartbreaking tragedy until a nurse at the children's hospital, who had previously treated Archie, grew suspicious. The nurse reported to authorities the discrepancy between what the couple posted and Archie's true medical history. Senior Constable Lena T. was assigned to investigate. She noticed a stark contrast between the couple's public image and their cold, calculating demeanor when dealing with the police. Lena focused on the data. She cross-referenced Archie's actual medical details with the timing and content of their social media posts. She discovered that every time they posted a high-peak donation request video, Archie experienced an unexplained dip in his health, suggesting deliberate intervention. The decisive evidence came from examining the couple's phones. Detective Lena found deleted messages and videos in which Mark and Jessica callously discussed cutting Archie's rations to get a better shot and calculating the amount of donations a crying video could generate. When confronted, Jessica and Mark attempted to justify themselves, claiming they did everything out of love and to raise awareness. But the final confession revealed the horrifying truth. They killed their child for financial gain and social media fame. The case of the malignant heart serves as a grim conclusion to the series, illustrating how far capitalist greed has evolved. Today, virtual fame and the control of attention can be a stronger motivator than cold cash, and some are willing to sacrifice anything, even their own child, to maintain their brand.